My farm was destroyed by a summer wildfire, so I went to my daughter's house. Her husband blocked the door. You will ruin my Persian rug that cost $18,000. I have no place for a homeless woman. Desperate, I called my late neighbor's son, a boy I treated like my own, now a billionaire. Nobody knew I had his number. When he landed his helicopter on their lawn and said 3 words, "I am glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you are watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." I never thought I would be standing on my own daughter's doorstep, begging for a place to sleep. At 68 years old, with nothing but the clothes on my back and the acrid smell of smoke still clinging to my hair, I knocked on Emily's pristine white door with trembling fingers. The wildfire had taken everything. 50 years of memories, sweat, and dreams reduced to ash in a single afternoon. My farmhouse, the barn where I had raised prize-winning cattle, the apple orchard my late husband Henry had planted with his own hands, all gone. The insurance adjuster said it would take months to process my claim, and even then, it might not cover rebuilding costs. I had nowhere else to go. Emily opened the door wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than I used to spend on groceries in 3 months. Her perfectly manicured eyebrows shot up when she saw me, and I watched her take in my soot-stained jeans and the small duffel bag containing what little I had managed to save. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Her voice carried that familiar tone of inconvenience I had grown used to over the years. "The farm burned down, sweetheart. I lost everything." My voice cracked, despite my efforts to stay strong. "I was hoping I could stay with you and Brian for a few days while I figure things out." Before Emily could respond, Brian appeared behind her. My son-in-law had always been particular about appearances, but the look of horror that crossed his face when he saw me standing there was something I would never forget. "Absolutely not," he said, stepping protectively in front of his wife. "Look at you. You are covered in ash, and God knows what else. You will ruin my Persian rug that cost $1,000. I felt my cheeks burn with shame. "I could clean up first, Brian. I just need—" "What you need is to figure out your own problems." He interrupted, his voice cold as winter. "We have a certain lifestyle here. Helen's image matters. I cannot have a homeless woman sleeping on my couch when my business associates might drop by." Homeless woman. The words hit me like a physical blow. In his eyes, that was all I was now. Not his mother-in-law, not the woman who had raised the daughter he claimed to love. Just another burden to be discarded. Emily shifted uncomfortably beside him, but she did not contradict her husband. My own daughter, the child I had nursed through pneumonia at age 6, who I had worked double shifts to put through college, stood there in silence while her husband called me homeless. "Please," I whispered, hating how desperate I sounded. "I raised you, Emily. I sacrificed everything for you. Does that not mean anything?" For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But then Brian placed a possessive hand on her shoulder, and whatever compassion might have been there, vanished. "Mom, you have to understand our position," Emily said, her voice carefully measured. "We live in an exclusive neighborhood. Brian is right about appearances. Maybe you could try calling your sister in Seattle." My sister in Seattle, who had not spoken to me in 8 years after our falling out over Henry's funeral arrangements. My sister who had made it clear I was not welcome in her life. Emily knew this, yet she suggested it anyway. "I see." I managed my throat tight with unshed tears. "I understand perfectly." Brian was already closing the door. "I am sure you will figure something out, Helen. You always were resourceful." The door shut with a decisive click, leaving me standing alone on their manicured porch. Through the frosted glass window, I could see their silhouettes moving away, probably returning to whatever expensive dinner they had been enjoying before I interrupted their perfect evening. I stood there for several minutes, shock and disbelief, warring with a pain so deep it felt like drowning. This was my daughter, my only child, the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who had cried when I had to work late shifts at the diner to make ends meet. Where was that child now? My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Emily. "Mom, I am sorry, but Brian is right. Maybe this is the wake-up call you need to start planning for your future more responsibly. There are senior living facilities that might help." Senior living facilities. Code for anywhere but here. I walked back to my old pickup truck, the one thing that had survived because I had driven it to town for supplies when the fire started. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys. Where could I go? The nearest motel was 35 miles away, and I only had $240 in my checking account. As I sat in the truck, the full weight of my situation crashed over me. I was 68, homeless, and apparently unwanted by my own family. The farm that had been my identity, my livelihood, my legacy, gone. The daughter I had devoted my life to raising, lost to greed and social climbing. But as I stared at their perfect house with its perfect lawn and perfect facade, something shifted inside me. The crushing despair began to transform into something else, something harder, something that had been building for years as I watched Emily become someone I barely recognized. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I had not called in 18 years. My finger hovered over the number, heart pounding. Would he even remember me? Would he care? There was only one way to find out. But as I stared at that name on my phone screen, I realized my daughter had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She had no idea who she had just turned away. None of them did. And when they found out what I had been keeping from them all these years, their perfect little world would never be the same. Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. Emily had just struck the match. Sitting in that parking lot outside Emily's house, I could not stop the memories from flooding back. Each one felt like a knife twist, reminding me of everything I had given up for the daughter who had just slammed the door in my face. I remembered the day Henry died. Emily was only 12, crying so hard at the funeral that she made herself sick. I held her all night in that narrow hospital bed while she threw up from grief, promising her that everything would be okay, even though I had no idea how I would keep that promise. Henry's life insurance barely covered the funeral costs. The farm was drowning in debt, and I had a 7th-grade daughter who needed stability more than ever. So I did what any mother would do. I worked 3 jobs. Breakfast shift at Murphy's Diner, afternoon cleaning houses for the wealthy families on the hill, and night shifts at the textile factory when I could get them. Emily never knew about the nights I cried myself to sleep exhausted and aching, wondering if I was strong enough to hold everything together. She never saw me eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner, so there would be enough money for her school clothes. She was just a child. She should not have had to know. But what broke my heart most was how she started looking at me during those years. Like I was an embarrassment, like my calloused hands and tired eyes somehow made me less than the other mothers who drove fancy cars and did not smell like diner grease. When she was 16, she stopped bringing friends home. "It is just easier to hang out at their houses, Mom," she would say. What she meant was that their houses were nicer, their mothers more polished. I was not the kind of mother she wanted her friends to see. I should have been angry. Instead, I worked harder. I wanted to give her everything those other kids had. I sacrificed my own dreams, my own future, telling myself it would all be worth it when she succeeded. The irony was not lost on me now. All those years of trying to make Emily's life perfect, and she had grown up to become exactly like the people who had looked down on us. But there was another child in those memories. A boy whose story was intertwined with ours in ways Emily never fully understood. Michael Turner lived in the falling down house next to our farm. His parents were the town drunks. Everyone knew it, but nobody talked about it. Not directly. When Michael was 8 years old, he started showing up at our kitchen door during dinner time, always with some excuse. My mom wanted to know if you had any sugar. Can I pet your cats? My dad says, do you need help with anything? The truth was written all over his thin frame and hollow eyes. The boy was hungry, and not just for food. He was starving for kindness, for someone to notice him, for a place where raised voices did not mean someone was about to get hurt. Henry saw it before I did. That boy needs looking after, he said one evening as we watched 8-year-old Michael through our kitchen window, sitting alone on his front steps. His folks are not right. After Henry died, Michael became my shadow. He would appear every morning before school helping with farm chores without being asked. When I came home from my shifts, exhausted and barely able to stand, he had already fed the chickens and gathered the eggs. You do not have to do that, sweetheart, I told him one afternoon when I found him mucking out stalls that were supposed to be my responsibility. I like helping, he said simply. Besides, you take care of everyone else. Someone should take care of you too. That was when I knew this boy had an old soul. He was only 9, but he understood something about love and loyalty that many adults never learn. He understood that family is not always about blood. Sometimes it is about choice. Michael never complained when his father came home drunk and violent. He never asked me to call social services, though God knows I should have. Instead, he would just show up at my door with his homework, and I would let him do it at my kitchen table while I cooked dinner. On the worst nights when the yelling from next door got too loud, I would find him sleeping in our barn come morning. Emily tolerated him because I insisted, but she never truly accepted him. Why does he always have to be here? She would whine when Michael joined us for Sunday dinners or family movie nights. Because he needs us, I would tell her. Sometimes we are the family people choose, not just the one they are born into. She would roll her eyes and retreat to her room. Even at 12, 13, 14, Emily had already decided that Michael Turner was beneath her notice. He was poor, his clothes were second-hand, and his parents were the kind of people respectable families whispered about. But I saw something in that boy. A fierce intelligence that school could not quite nurture, a determination that reminded me of my own younger self. When he was 15, he taught himself computer programming from library books. When he was 16, he was fixing neighbors' computers for spending money. When he was 17, he was already talking about college, about getting out of our small town and making something of himself. The last real conversation I had with Michael was the night before he left for college. He had earned a full scholarship to Stanford, something that still amazed our small-town high school counselor. We sat on my front porch sharing a thermos of coffee and watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. I would not have made it without you, Miss Helen, he said quietly. You know that, right? I squeezed his hand. You would have found a way, Michael. You are stronger than you know. Maybe, but you gave me something I never had before. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You gave me a family, a real one. That was 18 years ago. Michael Turner had kept in touch for the first few years of college, sending me Christmas cards and the occasional letter about his studies. Then life took over the way it does, and the contact grew sporadic. Last I had heard through town gossip, he had graduated from Stanford and moved to Silicon Valley. Someone said he had started his own company, but I had never paid much attention to the rumors. Now, sitting in my truck outside Emily's perfect house, I stared at his name in my phone contacts. Michael Turner, the scared little boy who used to help me feed chickens, had become a man I barely knew. Would he even remember the woman who had made him peanut butter sandwiches and helped him with homework? More importantly, would he care that she needed help now? My finger hovered over his number as another painful realization hit me. I had raised 2 children in that farmhouse. One was my biological daughter, who had just proven that blood meant nothing to her when it came to inconvenience. The other was a boy I had chosen to love, who had chosen to love me back. Maybe it was time to find out which kind of family really mattered. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. 18 years. It had been 18 years since I had heard Michael's voice. And here I was, about to call him at my lowest moment. What if he had forgotten me? What if he was busy, successful, surrounded by important people who would not understand why some old farm woman was interrupting his evening? But what choice did I have? I was 68, homeless, and apparently worthless to my own daughter. The truck was getting cold, and I needed to make a decision before the local motel filled up for the night. I pressed the call button before I could lose my nerve. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. My heart sank with each ring. Of course he would not answer. Why would a successful businessman take calls from unknown numbers late in the evening? I was about to hang up when I heard his voice. Hello? It was deeper now, mature, but there was something in the tone that made my throat close up with recognition. This was still Michael. My Michael, even after all these years, Michael. My voice came out as barely a whisper. This is Helen, Helen Carter from Miss Helen. The change in his voice was instant, electric. Miss Helen, oh my God, are you okay? Is everything all right? He remembered. Not only did he remember, but the first thing he asked was if I was okay. Tears started flowing before I could stop them. I am sorry for calling you out of the blue like this. I managed through my tears. I know it has been so long, and you probably have a family now, responsibilities. Stop, he said firmly but gently. Do not you dare apologize. You can call me anytime, anywhere for anything. You know that. Now tell me what is wrong. So I did. I told him about the wildfire, about losing the farm, about standing on Emily's doorstep only to be turned away like a beggar. I told him about Brian calling me homeless, about Emily's silence, about having nowhere to go. The words poured out like water through a broken dam, 18 years of distance collapsing in the span of a single phone call. Michael listened without interrupting, making small sounds of sympathy and growing anger. When I finished, there was a long pause that made my stomach clench with fear. Had I burdened him too much? Had I presumed too much on a relationship that existed decades ago? Miss Helen, he said, finally, his voice thick with emotion. That woman is not the little girl you raised. What Emily did tonight is unforgivable. The fierce protectiveness in his voice reminded me of the teenage boy who used to get angry when kids at school said cruel things about my second-hand clothes or my multiple jobs. Even then, Michael had defended me more fiercely than my own daughter ever had. She is still my daughter, I said weakly, though the words felt hollow. No, Michael said with quiet certainty. A daughter does not abandon her mother. A daughter does not call the woman who sacrificed everything for her homeless. You know what you are to me, Miss Helen. You are the only mother I ever really had, and no mother of mine is going to spend tonight in a shelter or a car. My breath caught. Michael, I was not calling to ask for money or... I know you were not. That is exactly why I am going to help you. Where are you right now? I looked around the parking lot, still within sight of Emily's house. I am still in Ridgefield in my truck outside Emily's house. Actually, I know how that sounds. It sounds like you are in shock, which is completely understandable. Are you safe to drive? I think so. Good. There is a Hilton about 20 miles north on Highway 14. Do you know it? I did. It was the fancy hotel where Emily and Brian had held their wedding reception. Yes, but Michael, I cannot afford. You are not paying for anything. I am going to call them right now and book you a suite. Get yourself their order room service, take a hot bath, and try to get some sleep. Can you do that for me? A suite at the Hilton? I could not even imagine what that would cost. But Michael was talking like money was no object. Michael, you do not have to. Yes, I do. You took care of me when I had nothing. Now it is my turn to take care of you. His voice softened. Besides, you are going to need to be well rested for tomorrow. Tomorrow? I am flying out first thing in the morning. I will be there by noon. Flying out? My mind struggled to process this. Where are you flying from? Los Angeles. Do not worry about the details, Miss Helen. Just focus on getting somewhere safe tonight. I will handle everything else. Los Angeles was 1,300 miles away. The idea that Michael would drop everything and fly across the country just because I called seemed impossible. You do not have to come all this way. I just needed to hear a friendly voice. Miss Helen. His voice was gentle but firm. Do you remember what you told me the night before I left for college? I thought back to that evening on my front porch, the thermos of coffee, the sunset. I remember we talked about a lot of things. You told me that family takes care of family no matter what. You said that when someone you love is hurting, you do not hesitate. You do not make excuses. You just show up. The words came back to me then. I had been trying to prepare him for the world beyond our small town, trying to teach him about loyalty and love in a way his own parents never had. I remember I whispered, "Well, I am showing up. And Miss Helen, there is something else you need to know. Something about what I have been doing with my life since I left Ridgefield." My heart started beating faster. There was something in his voice, a weight that suggested this conversation was about to take another turn. What is it, sweetheart? The company I started after Stanford. It has done pretty well for itself. Actually, it has done better than well, Miss Helen. I am not just comfortable. I am wealthy. Very wealthy. The word hung in the air between us. Wealthy. The boy who used to wear my late husband's hand-me-down shirts because his own clothes had holes in them was wealthy. How wealthy? I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know the answer. Forbes put my net worth at $3.2 billion last year. The phone nearly slipped from my hands. Billion, not million. Billion. Michael Turner, the skinny kid who used to help me gather eggs, was a billionaire. I know it is a lot to process, he continued, but here is what matters. Every success I have ever had, every dollar I have ever earned, every achievement that has brought me to this point, it all started in your kitchen, Miss Helen. You gave me the foundation that made everything else possible. I could not speak. My mind was reeling, trying to reconcile the scared little boy in my memories with the man on the phone who was casually discussing billions of dollars. Tomorrow, when I get to Ridgefield, we are going to have a conversation with your daughter and her husband. They are going to learn exactly who they turned away tonight. But more importantly, you are never going to worry about having a roof over your head again. I am going to take care of you the way you took care of me, Michael. I do not need billions of dollars. I know you do not. That is one of the reasons you deserve them. His voice grew warmer, more tender. Miss Helen, for 18 years, I have been trying to figure out how to repay you for saving my life. Tomorrow, I finally get the chance. As I hung up the phone and started the truck to drive to the Hilton, one thought kept echoing in my mind. Emily had just refused shelter to a woman who had raised a billionaire who still called her his real mother. My daughter had no idea what was coming for her. But she was about to find out that some mistakes cannot be undone, and some bridges once burned take everything else down with them. The boy I had chosen to love was coming home, and he was bringing enough power to change all our lives forever. I woke up in the most luxurious hotel room I had ever seen. Egyptian cotton sheets, marble bathroom, a view of the mountains that took my breath away. For a moment, I forgot where I was and why I was there. Then it all came rushing back. The fire. Emily's rejection, Michael's phone call. Even in the morning light, it seemed impossible. The scared little boy from next door was now worth billions, and he was flying across the country to help me. I checked my phone. It was 9:47 in the morning. He had said he would be here by noon. I had barely finished my complimentary breakfast when my phone rang. "Miss Helen, I just landed at the regional airport. I will be there in about 20 minutes. Landed. Not my plane landed or the flight arrived. Just I landed like he owned the aircraft, which I was beginning to realize he probably did. Should I meet you in the lobby? Actually, I was thinking we might pay a visit to your daughter and her husband first, if you are up for it." My stomach clenched. "Michael, I do not want any trouble. There will not be trouble. I just think it is time they understood who they turned away last night. You do not have to say anything if you do not want to. Just let me do the talking." 23 minutes later, I heard a sound that made everyone in the hotel lobby look up. It was the unmistakable whop-whop of helicopter blades growing louder by the second. I walked outside just in time to see a sleek black helicopter settling onto the hotel's front lawn. The hotel staff rushed around frantically, probably trying to figure out if this was legal, while guests pressed against windows to get a better look. The helicopter door opened, and Michael Turner stepped out. I barely recognized him. The skinny boy with second-hand clothes had been replaced by a man in an impeccably tailored suit, moving with the quiet confidence that comes from having enough power to reshape the world around you. But when he saw me, his entire face transformed into the warm smile I remembered from 18 years ago. "Miss Helen." He walked straight to me and wrapped me in the kind of hug that made me feel like everything was going to be okay. He was taller than I remembered broader, but his arms still felt like safety. "Look at you," I whispered, pulling back to study his face. "You are all grown up, thanks to you." His eyes were serious now. "Are you ready for this?" I nodded, though I was not sure I was ready for anything anymore. The helicopter ride to Emily's neighborhood took less than 5 minutes. Michael had called ahead to get permission to land on the municipal park across from her house, though I suspected someone with his resources did not really need to ask permission for much. As we descended, I could see people coming out of their houses pointing at the helicopter. This was Ridgefield's exclusive Oakview Estates, where the biggest excitement was usually someone getting a new BMW. A private helicopter landing in their neighborhood was definitely not normal. I spotted Emily's house, then Emily herself standing in her front yard, with Brian beside her. They were staring at the helicopter with the same bewildered expression as their neighbors. Michael helped me down from the aircraft, his hands steady and reassuring on my arm. "Remember," he said quietly as we walked across the park toward the street. "You do not owe them explanations. You do not owe them anything." By the time we reached Emily's driveway, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered at what they probably thought was a respectful distance. Brian was trying to look stern and authoritative, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. Emily just looked confused. "Mom," she called out as we approached. "What is going on? Whose helicopter is that?" Michael stepped slightly in front of me, a protective gesture that reminded me of the teenage boy who used to walk me to my car after late shifts at the diner. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. "I believe you met my mother last night." Emily's mouth opened slightly. "Your mother? I do not understand." "Helen Carter, the woman you turned away from your door, the woman your husband called homeless." Michael's voice was perfectly controlled, but I could hear the steel underneath. Brian stepped forward, clearly trying to reassert some authority. "Now wait just a minute. I do not know who you are or why you think you can." "Michael Turner." Michael interrupted, extending his hand in a gesture that looked polite but somehow made Brian step backward. "You might know me better as Michael Turner. I used to live next door to Helen when I was a child." I watched the color drain from Brian's face as recognition dawned. Even in our small town, Michael's success story had become legendary. The poor kid who had made it to Stanford, who had built a tech empire, who had been featured on the cover of Time magazine not long ago. "You are that Michael Turner," Emily whispered, her eyes darting between Michael and me. "The billionaire." "I prefer to think of myself as Helen Carter's son," Michael said simply. "The son who is going to make sure she never has to ask anyone for help again." The neighbors were getting closer now, drawn by the obvious tension and the increasingly surreal nature of the conversation happening in broad daylight on Ridgefield's most prestigious street. Brian, to his credit, tried to rally. "Look, Mr. Turner, I appreciate your concern, but this is a family matter." "You are absolutely right," Michael agreed. "It is a family matter. That is why I am here." He turned to look directly at Emily. "Your mother raised me from the time I was 8 years old. She fed me when my own parents would not help me with homework when they were too drunk to care, and made sure I had clean clothes for school. She worked 3 jobs to keep food on her table, and she always made room for one more." Emily's face was getting redder by the minute. "She never told me you two were still in touch. We were not. Michael said last night was the first time we had spoken in 18 years. She called me because she had nowhere else to go. Because the daughter she raised, the daughter she sacrificed everything for, slammed the door in her face when she needed help most. We have our own family to think about." Brian started. "Family." Michael repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "Let me tell you about family, Mr. Randall. Family does not abandon each other. Family does not call each other homeless. And family sure as hell does not worry more about a Persian rug than the woman who gave up her own dreams so her daughter could have everything." The small crowd of neighbors was close enough now to hear every word. I could see phones being pulled out, probably to record this confrontation that would be gossip gold for months to come. "Michael, please," I said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "This is enough." He looked down at me, his expression softening immediately. "No, Miss Helen, it is not nearly enough, but it is a start." He turned back to Emily and Brian. "I want you both to understand something. Helen Carter is the most important person in my life. She always has been, and she always will be. From this day forward, anything she needs, anything she wants, she gets. No questions asked." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is the deed to a house about an hour from here. 7 bedrooms, 10 acres full-time staff. If she wants it, it is hers now, free and clear." Emily's eyes widened as she stared at the envelope. 7 bedrooms. I also set up a trust fund in her name this morning. $30 million. She will never have to worry about money again. Michael's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather instead of an amount of money that would change someone's life forever. $30 million. I felt dizzy. The farmhouse that had burned down was worth maybe $250,000, and that included the land. Brian looked like he might be sick. 30 million. That is just the start. Michael continued his eyes, never leaving Emily's face. Miss Helen does not just get a house and money. She gets everything I have, every resource, every connection, every door that my success can open. She gets a family who actually appreciates what she has done. She already has a family, Emily said weakly. Michael shook his head. No, she had a daughter who taught her last night that sometimes the family you choose is more loyal than the family you are born into. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the neighbors had stopped murmuring, sensing that they were witnessing something that would define relationships for years to come. Finally, Michael turned back to me. Miss Helen, there is a car waiting to take you to your new home. The staff is expecting you, and I have arranged for someone to take you shopping for anything you need. Would you like to go see it? I nodded, not trusting my voice to work properly. As we turned to walk back toward the helicopter, Emily's voice stopped us. Mom, wait. Can we talk? I turned around slowly. My daughter looked smaller, somehow, diminished by the weight of what she had just learned. What would you like to talk about, sweetheart? I made a mistake last night. I should have. Brian and I were just... She stumbled over the words, clearly struggling to find a way to undo what could not be undone. Michael stepped forward again, his voice gentle but final. Mrs. Carter, mistakes are when you forget to return a phone call or show up late to dinner. What you did last night was not a mistake. It was a choice, and choices have consequences. As the helicopter lifted off, I looked down at Emily standing in her perfect yard, in front of her perfect house, and I felt something I had not expected. Not anger, not satisfaction, but pity. She had no idea what she had lost until it was too late to get it back. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. And my daughter's education was just beginning. The house Michael bought me was nothing like I had ever imagined living in. Sitting on 10 acres of rolling hills, it was a colonial-style mansion with white pillars and wraparound porches that looked like something from a magazine. The staff, a housekeeper named Marisol, a groundskeeper named Robert, and a cook named Elena, treated me like royalty from the moment I walked through the front door. This is your home now, Mrs. Carter Marisol said warmly as she showed me through room after room of elegant furniture and pristine decor. Mr. Turner made it very clear that anything you need, anything you want, changed. You just have to ask. That first week passed in a blur of luxury I had never experienced. Fresh flowers delivered daily. Meals prepared exactly to my preferences. A wardrobe consultant who helped me shop for clothes that actually fit properly for the first time in decades. I felt like Cinderella, except my fairy godmother was a billionaire who still called me his real mother. Michael visited every few days, always bringing something thoughtful, books he thought I would enjoy, photos he had found of our old neighborhood news about mutual acquaintances from Ridgefield. But mostly, he just wanted to sit with me on the front porch, drinking coffee and talking like we used to when he was a teenager. Are you happy here? He asked during one of those visits, studying my face carefully. I looked out over the manicured gardens, the small lake with its fountain, the life of ease and comfort that had replaced my burned-down farmhouse. It is beautiful, Michael. More beautiful than anything I ever dreamed of. That is not what I asked. I smiled at his persistence. Even as a child, he had a way of seeing through polite answers to the truth underneath. I am adjusting. It is a lot to get used to. We can get you a different house if you prefer. Smaller, maybe closer to town? No, sweetheart. This is perfect. I am just not used to having people take care of me instead of the other way around. He reached over and squeezed my hand. You spent 42 years taking care of everyone else. It is your turn now. That same evening, as I was settling in with a book in what the staff called the library, an actual library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a rolling ladder. Marisol knocked on the door. "Mrs. Carter, your daughter is here. She says she needs to speak with you urgently." My stomach clenched. I had been expecting this, but that did not make it any easier. "Show her in, please." Emily appeared in the doorway a moment later, her eyes wide as she took in the elegant room. She had clearly dressed carefully for this visit. Her best dress, her most expensive jewelry, her hair styled in the way she thought made her look most appealing. "Mom." She stood there uncertainly, like she was not sure whether she was allowed to enter fully. "Come in, sweetheart. Sit down." She perched on the edge of a leather chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, she cleared her throat. "This place is incredible." "It is. I had no idea Michael Turner had done so well for himself. I mean, I knew he was successful, but this level of wealth." She gestured around the room. "He has done very well." Another silence. I could see her struggling with how to approach whatever she had come to say. Finally, the words burst out of her. "Mom, I made a terrible mistake the other night. Brian and I both did. We were shocked, unprepared, and we reacted badly. But you have to understand, we never meant to hurt you." I studied her face, looking for genuine remorse and seeing mostly panic. "What did you mean to do then? We just thought... I mean, you are so independent, so capable. We figured you would work something out on your own." We did not realize how serious the situation was. "I told you I had lost everything in the fire, Emily. How much more serious did it need to be?" Her cheeks flushed. "You are right. You are absolutely right. But Mom, we can fix this. Brian and I have been talking, and we want to make things right between us. We want you to come home to our house. We have prepared the guest room for you. It is all ready. New sheets, fresh flowers, everything you need. You could move in this weekend if you want." I felt a sad smile tugging at my lips. And Michael's house, Michael's money, his trust fund. What happens to all of that? Emily's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something desperate and calculating underneath. "Well, I mean, you do not really need all this, do you? This house is so big, so impersonal. Would you not rather be with family?" There it was, the real reason for her visit. She wanted me to give up the life Michael had provided and come live in their guest room, where they could be close to me and to the $30 million trust fund. "I see." I stood up slowly. "And what does Brian think about having his homeless mother-in-law move in permanently?" "He feels terrible about what he said. He wants to apologize personally. How generous of him." Emily stood too, moving closer to me. "Mom, please. I know we hurt you, but we are family. We are your real family. This Michael Turner, I mean, yes, you helped him when he was a child, but that was a long time ago. He is just feeling guilty because he never stayed in touch. Once that guilt wears off, where will you be?" The words hit their target, awakening fears I had been trying to suppress. What if she was right? What if Michael's generosity was just temporary guilt? And once it faded, I would be alone again. But then I remembered his face when he stepped off that helicopter. The fierce protectiveness in his voice when he confronted Brian, the way he still called me his mother. "You are worried he will abandon me the way you did." Emily flinched. "That is not fair. We did not abandon you. You slammed the door in my face, Emily. Your husband called me homeless and said I would ruin his Persian rug. How is that not abandonment? We were protecting our home, our lifestyle, from your own mother." The words hung in the air between us. Emily's composure finally cracked completely. "Fine. Yes, we were protecting ourselves from you, from your problems, your neediness, your constant reminders of everything we have worked so hard to rise above. The ugly truth poured out of her like poison. Do you think it is easy being your daughter? Do you think I enjoyed growing up poor? Watching you work yourself to death being embarrassed by our secondhand everything while my friends had nice things. I absorbed each word like a physical blow. I did my best, Emily. I gave you everything I could. I know you did. Tears were streaming down her face now. And I am grateful. I really am. But I spent my whole childhood promising myself I would never live like that again. I would never be poor, never be looked down on, never have to worry about money. Brian gave me that security, and you threatened it. Yes. No, I do not know. She sank back into the chair, her perfect facade completely demolished. I just know that when I saw you standing there with your soot-covered clothes and your desperate eyes, you looked like everything I had run away from. And I panicked. The honesty was brutal, but at least it was honest. For the first time since she had arrived, I felt like I was talking to my real daughter instead of a carefully crafted performance. And now I asked gently, now I realize I might have thrown away the most important relationship in my life for the sake of a Persian rug and social appearances. Her voice was small, defeated. I want to fix this, Mom. I need to fix this. I sat back down across from her. What you need and what you want might be two different things, sweetheart. What do you mean? You want to fix this because you have seen what I mean to Michael, and you have realized there might be benefits to having me in your life. But do you actually want me, Emily? Do you want your mother with all my flaws and limitations and embarrassing history? Or do you want access to what my relationship with Michael might provide? She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of a lifetime of complicated emotions. I do not know how to answer that, she finally admitted. At least that is honest. What I do know, she continued, is that I love you. I have always loved you even when I was ashamed of our circumstances. And I know that losing you would destroy me. I reached over and took her hand. You have not lost me, sweetheart. But the relationship we had before, the one where I gave, and you took it for granted, that relationship is gone. It burned up with my farmhouse. Then what is left? I do not know yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe something better than what we had before. But that is up to you to decide. She squeezed my hand. How do I decide? You start by going home to Brian and thinking about what kind of daughter you want to be going forward. Not what kind of daughter you think I want, or what kind will get you the most benefit, but what kind feels right to you. And you. What will you be doing while I am figuring that out? I looked around the beautiful library, thought about Michael's upcoming visit, about the peaceful life I was building in this place where I was valued simply for being myself. I will be living my life, Emily. For the first time in decades, I will be living just for me. After she left, I sat alone in the library for a long time, processing everything she had said. The truth was painful, but it was also freeing. At least now I knew where I stood with my daughter. At least now I could stop hoping for something that had never really existed. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Michael. Hope you are having a good evening. Elena mentioned she is making your favorite pot roast tomorrow. I cannot wait to join you for dinner. I smiled, feeling the knot in my chest loosen slightly. Some family is chosen, not born. And sometimes, the family that chooses you loves you better than the family that shares your blood ever could. Emily would have to decide what kind of daughter she wanted to be. But I already knew what kind of son Michael was. The kind who flew 2,800 miles to rescue the woman who had rescued him first. 6 months later, I was sitting on my front porch, watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink and gold when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Emily's number. Her 5th attempt to reach me this week. I let it go to voicemail. It was not that I was angry with her anymore. Anger required too much energy, and I had found better uses for mine. I was learning to paint watercolors with an instructor Michael had found for me. I was volunteering at the regional animal shelter, something I had always wanted to do, but never had time for. I was taking a literature class at the community college, reading books I had always meant to get to during those 42 years of working 3 jobs and raising ungrateful children. Most importantly, I was learning what it felt like to be someone's priority instead of someone's obligation. Michael visited every week, sometimes twice a week when his schedule allowed. He would bring his laptop and work from my kitchen table while I cooked, just like when he was a teenager. Sometimes he brought colleagues to introduce to me. Brilliant, accomplished people who treated me with the respect due to someone who had shaped their boss's character. "This is Helen," he would tell them. "She taught me everything that matters about integrity and loyalty. Everything good about who I am started at her kitchen table." Last month, he had surprised me by having that kitchen table shipped from the old farmhouse ruins. Somehow, his people had found it intact in the debris barely damaged. Now it sat in my new kitchen, scarred and familiar, a bridge between my old life and my new one. The voicemail notification chimed against my better judgment. I played Emily's message. "Mom, it is me again. I know you are probably tired of hearing from me, but I really need to talk to you. Things have gotten complicated and her voice broke. I need your advice. Please call me back." I deleted the message without a second thought. Some lessons can only be learned through consequences, and Emily was still learning hers. Through mutual acquaintances, I had heard about those consequences. Brian had been passed over for a promotion at his firm after word spread about how he had treated me. Apparently, his boss was a woman who did not appreciate men who called their mothers-in-law homeless. Their social standing in Hawthorne had plummeted once the story got out. And in a small town, stories like that always get out. More significantly, Brian's business had started losing clients. Several of his wealthiest customers had mentioned they were uncomfortable working with someone who showed such disrespect to family. In their circle, reputation was everything, and Brian's reputation was now toxic. The financial pressure was mounting. I had heard they had had to sell Brian's BMW and were considering downsizing their house. The Persian rug that was more important than his mother-in-law's welfare had been sold on eBay 3 months ago. But Emily's real punishment was not financial. It was watching other people receive what she had thrown away. Michael had started a foundation focused on supporting single mothers in rural communities, women who reminded him of me during those difficult years after Henry died. He had invited me to serve on the board, and I had discovered I had a talent for identifying which programs would make the most difference in women's lives. Last week, the foundation had hosted a gala in Los Angeles. Michael had flown me out for it, put me up in a penthouse suite, bought me a gown that cost more than I used to make in 3 months. I had walked into that ballroom on his arm, introduced as my mother, Helen Carter, to tech billionaires, politicians, and celebrities who had actually heard of me through Michael's stories. The event raised $15 million for single mothers. $15 million that would provide childcare education assistance and emergency funds for women who were struggling the way I had struggled. As I stood on that stage thanking the donors, I thought about the scared young mother I had been 32 years ago, working myself to exhaustion just to keep a roof over our heads. That woman could never have imagined she would someday be standing in a ballroom full of the most powerful people in the world advocating for other women like herself. The local newspaper had run a photo of Michael and me at the gala. In it, we were both smiling, his arm around my shoulders, and I was wearing a silver necklace he had given me. A simple pendant that read, "World's Greatest Mom." I knew Emily had seen the photo because 3 days later she had driven to my house uninvited. "Mom, we need to talk," she had said, standing on my front porch in a cheap dress I did not recognize. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect hair. She looked tired, older, desperate. "We really do not," I had replied calmly. "I have lost everything. Brian filed for divorce last month. He blamed me for ruining his career. Said marrying me was the worst decision he ever made." Tears had started flowing. "I am living in a studio apartment above the laundromat. I am working at the diner where you used to work. The same diner, Mom. Harrison's Diner." I had felt a twinge of something. Not quite sympathy, but recognition. I knew what it was like to work at Harrison's Diner, to come home exhausted and smelling like grease. But I had done it out of love to support my child. Emily was doing it because her choices had finally caught up with her. "I am sorry you are struggling," I had said, and I meant it. "But your problems are not mine to solve anymore. But I am your daughter. You are a 42-year-old woman who made her choices clearly and deliberately. You chose Brian over me, money over family, appearances over love. Now you have to live with those choices. People make mistakes. Mom, do not I deserve forgiveness?" That is when I had looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the scared child she was pretending to be, but the calculating woman she had become. Forgiveness is not the same as rescue. I had told her I forgave you months ago, but forgiving you does not mean I am going to save you from the consequences of your actions. She had left after that, but not before I had caught her taking photos of my house with her phone, probably planning to sell them to some gossip blog or use them to convince people she still had access to Michael's wealth through me. This morning, Michael was coming for our weekly breakfast. He had been traveling for the past 12 days, closing a deal that would apparently add another $600 million to his net worth. But he had called every day, checking on me, making sure I was happy and healthy and had everything I needed. I heard his helicopter before I saw it. That familiar sound that had become the soundtrack of my new life. As he walked up the front steps, I marveled again at the transformation. Not just his success, but the way he carried himself, now confident, powerful, but still gentle when he looked at me. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. "How is my favorite mother today?" "Perfect, now that you are here." He settled into the chair beside me, accepting the coffee Marisol brought out. "Any word from Emily this week?" 5 calls. I did not answer any of them. He nodded approvingly. "Good. You have given her enough chances. Sometimes I wonder if I am being too harsh." "Miss Helen," he said, taking my hand in both of his. "You spent 32 years being too soft. You gave and gave until you had nothing left. Look where it got you. Standing on her doorstep, begging for shelter after you had lost everything." He was right, but it was still difficult to completely let go of the guilt. She is still my daughter, and I am still your son. The difference is, I chose to be. Every day I wake up grateful that you saved me. Emily wakes up resentful that you were not perfect. His voice grew firm. You do not owe her anything more than what you have already given. Later that afternoon, as Michael worked on his laptop in the kitchen and I prepared dinner, I found myself thinking about the path that had led me here. The fire that destroyed my farm had felt like the end of everything, but it had really been the beginning of learning that I was worth more than I had ever allowed myself to believe. My phone buzzed with a text message, not from Emily this time, but from Maria Santos, a woman I had met through the foundation. She was a single mother of 3 in a small town in Nevada, working 2 jobs and struggling to pay for her daughter's cancer treatments. Mrs. Carter, the text read. The foundation's emergency fund paid for Emma's surgery today. The doctors say she is going to be fine. I do not know how to thank you for what you have done for our family. You saved my little girl's life. I showed the message to Michael, who smiled and squeezed my shoulder. This is what matters, he said. This is the legacy you are building. That evening, as I sat on my porch, watching another spectacular sunset, I thought about Emily working her shift at Harrison's Diner, going home to her studio apartment, probably scrolling through photos of my new life on social media and feeling sorry for herself. I thought about Brian, whose social climbing and materialism had cost him everything he thought he valued. And I thought about myself, a 64-year-old woman who had lost her farm but found her worth, who had been rejected by her daughter but embraced by the son she had chosen to love. Some stories do not end with reconciliation. Some end with acceptance. Accepting that you cannot save people who do not want to be saved, that you cannot love people into loving you back, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let people live with the consequences of their choices. My phone rang again, Emily's number. This time, I turned the phone off completely. Tomorrow, Michael and I were flying to Denver to visit another foundation project. Next week, I was meeting with a publisher who wanted me to write a book about resilience and second chances. Next month, I was taking a cooking class in Tuscany, something I had dreamed about for decades, but never thought I would be able to afford. I was living the life I had always deserved, but never thought to ask for. And I was living it with people who chose me, valued me, and loved me exactly as I was. The boy I had saved me right back. And this time, I was smart enough to accept the rescue. Some families are born, some are built, and some are earned through years of loyalty, love, and sacrifice that is recognized and returned instead of taken for granted. I had finally learned the difference, and it had made all the difference in the world. Now I am curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I am leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.